So I want to start. I want to start in state, and then I want to get to. Did you, by any chance, hear your colleague's segment yesterday that lit my timeline on fire?
No, I
Okay,
didn't.
I'll
Sorry.
I'll reset it for you here in a second. Let's start with Jace Reynolds, though. In state, second guy out of Elkhorn North that is making some waves on the Power Five scope. Is it as simple to say good camp versus no camp, or what do you think was different about Jace's recruitment and how quickly they wrapped it up?
Well, I mean, the camp part you have to put at the front of the
Yeah.
line in that story. I
It
mean,
seems like it, doesn't it?
yeah, I mean, like even the other day, I saw EJ Barthel tweeted out, come basically show us what you got at camp, and Matt Rule has said as much, and so they want guys to have that opportunity up close to put their traits on display, and we've seen like when guys come to camp, I mean, they'll give them a full look. I mean, there's whether it's an in-state guy or like a Braylon Prude type player down in Texas, that there's an opportunity there. You run a fast time, you have certain traits, but also they'll put them through all the paces. Like I remember Quinn Clark was a guy who didn't have an offer, and they were working him at like 4 different positions, like seeing how he would react to it. So I think Jace just responded really well last June to everything that they threw at him. And then he backed it up with a really good season. And so, obviously they haven't been able to or haven't offered as many in-state guys. So just the fact that he was like one of the 3 in this cycle that had an offer speaks to like we see a lot in this guy, and he's a hybrid type player, can be kind of positionless coming in, linebacker DB type guy. Um, you know, reminds me a little bit of when they went after Caden Vermoss early on when they got here. So I'm happy for him because he's one of those kids who grew up loving the N, and it was such a big deal to him yesterday. And he kind of just went about his business in the recruiting process, did a few interviews like, yeah, I had a good visit, but he didn't put on a big show, and now he's in the class.
BC, if you had to guess, do you think he'll end up being the only in-state guy in this class?
Mm.
Man, I guess I don't know where a couple of the guys' heads are at. No, I don't think so. I think there could be at least a couple more. I know the offers are limited now, but I think next month you might see some guys show up, and there could be an offer or two, and so there's probably someone we're not talking about right now that could pop up. So I don't think so. That's an interesting question, though, and it's asked for a valid reason. But I would guess there's a couple more.
Hey, BC, I almost feel dirty asking this question, but I think you have to because he's clearly highly thought of and highly sought after, and still he doesn't hold a Nebraska offer, and I think that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
What? How do you see this Braylon Warren thing playing out as a guy that still has 2 more years of high school left?
Yeah, I don't know. He's I don't know. I mean, it's tough because they've got someone locked up in the class now, but I think
I mean, he could
Braylon.
be in uncharted waters here by the time it's all said and done.
Yeah, I don't know how you handle that if he just keeps you know on the climb basically. And I suspect he might do that, knowing his family background and how motivated he is. So I mean, it is in kind of an interesting storyline. Nebraska gets a QB from another Big Ten state, and we'll see where it ends up for Braylon. But he's a very good player. I mean, that's all I could say right now. Is I just know he's got a lot of gifts, and he's worked at it hard for a long time. And you know how I am, Damon. I always root for the
Yeah.
guys, like the in-state guys, like no matter where they go. I want them to have success. And I sometimes think it's difficult when your situation's being played out like publicly as it is, but that just kind of goes with it. But I know he's going to have the right head on his shoulders to handle this, with his family background, but also from what I know about just the type of kid he is. So that's an awesome place to start when you have the type of mentality he has, that just like keep pushing forward, and he has great opportunities in front of him, whether one of them's in the in-state school or not. He's going to end up at a really good school and be able to show himself. And you never know how this thing winds around anymore. So still a lot of chapters to play out there.
Yeah, BC, I find it fascinating when we're talking about these high-profile in-state kids, and then you sort of add that extra level of being a legacy kid, right? Where, there's a part of me that I root for the kids in the state, and I want them to have success. And sometimes, and I'm just recently, and I think it's something that DB said.
Probably.
I just recently, I mean, it's rare that you actually land anything, but it's okay. I think there's something to, maybe there's other places that are better for him in the sense of just the mentality of if he's not successful at Nebraska as an in-state kid and as a legacy, that feels different, especially if it's just not early. That feels different than if he goes to he's got offers from like Illinois and Cal and these other places, right? Where if he takes a couple years to get going at Illinois, it's a totally different experience for him. And for some guys, that's better, right? Like I started to come around on this. So as much as be like, oh man, it would be awesome to get Brilan Worgan in the class or whoever it is, right? There's a part of me that goes, maybe that's just not what's best for him.
Yeah, I think you nailed it with that answer. I don't know what his mindset is on that whole thing, but no, it's a point well taken. It's actually the same thing basically Matt Rule said, right, when he was given the long in-state answer, that it is difficult sometimes for the guys locally with all that heat on them basically to produce, and especially when you multiply that by 100 when you're the quarterback and, like you say, a legacy. There's a lot to that. So maybe it will work out really well for him. And I mean, it's just a different era now. Like, I mean, Nebraska goes into Iowa sometimes, and Iowa kids are interested, and there's all sorts of schools coming into Nebraska. And I've really had to shift my mind since I started this beat like a couple decades ago about the whole in-state conversation. I mean, it's kids I think are way more open, first off, to explore and go elsewhere. Nebraska's made it easier on them somewhat by not having a lot of success over the last, decade. And, there's a lot of, I think the talent pools kept growing too in this stage. There's just so many good football players that are going to get opportunities. And I know there's people over there at Stadium Drive who root for those guys too, even though they can't, or they don't offer all of them and can only offer a select few. They still want them to succeed. And I know Rule always says that.
So BC, I agree with you on the talent pool thing, because I've said this before. It used to be if there was 2 Division I guys in the state and you didn't get them, that was a big deal. If there's 10 Division I guys in the state and you get 4 of them, you let 6 get away, but it feels different, right? But I was trying to remember, and with your Rolodex, you might be able to help me here.
Did you say Rolodex?
I did say Rolodex. That's yours. It makes more sense that the good point was from Rule, though, not you. That actually checks out. But if you can remember, would Brilan be the first both legacy and in-state guy at quarterback we're talking about?
Yes.
So he's even I know the uncharted waters you were talking about are different, but he's in a totally different boat.
And here's the thing with me, B, is you talked about, you're with me about the in-state guy or kids in general just wanting the best. With me, it's almost like I go into protective mode.
Mm-hmm. It can be like
Nebraska's gonna 100%.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like I don't want to get into is he better than what we got, or the other way. Well, Nebraska's got to do this. These other schools are not. Sometimes those things just aren't going to intersect. It doesn't have to be.
They can be mutually exclusive.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be. Well, he's not this. He must not be that. Where you demean the young man, and it also doesn't have to mean that there's pressure on Nebraska, because, like, it's his own journey, right? He gets
And Nebraska got a really good quarterback too. Braylon's good, and Trey Taylor, on paper with and just watching his film, and also you go back and look at, basically since 7th grade, he was, walking into meeting rooms, and it's like, okay, tell me what this check is in this audible, and he's laying it out to the Maryland coaching staff, when he's 12 or 13 years old. So it's a really impressive young guy. that just committed to Nebraska. So it makes sense that the Huskers are excited or we're in on him. And, he was ready to pull the trigger because he'd been a recruit also who'd been Trey Taylor, that is, who'd been out there for like 3 years as a recruit. I mean, this wasn't like a hasty decision by him. So Nebraska's got a good one. Brilan's going to end up in a great spot. And like I said, there's still so many chapters still when we're talking about 27 guys. You hate to say anything that's too concrete because you never know how the story can twist.
BC, we did the same exercise with Mike J yesterday that I did. You started this with the above or below.
I didn't do very well with it, but because
you didn't like. So did you? When you went back, do you want to do it again?
I would have changed a couple. I was sort of off the cuff. I'm one of those guys who, like, after a radio segment, I'll be like driving in my car to Ace Hardware or wherever, and I'll think like, oh, I would have said this differently for sure. It's it gives me like, I need this brain to like churn around for like 20 to 25 minutes, and then I could give you some really awesome stuff. I'm telling you. But yeah, we could cut through it.
Here, so 1, 2, 3.
That
4,
sounds a lot
5,
like
6,
me,
7,
by the way.
8. So Dave only had 2 aboves, and they probably weren't the teams that you think of.
2 teams that he thought were for sure above Nebraska.
No, that Nebraska
was above.
Oh, okay.
It came across as very.
He's a hater. That's what he is.
It was a really, really good segment because it sparked up. And I'll get to the end because I think there's 2 things that changed because basically I just listened to him and Ravi. Ravi's on one end of the spectrum. Shafe is on the other. And I thought they both made outstanding points. But here, let me get to this real quick. So these are the teams in the middle that Nebraska's going to have to make a move on.
Yes.
Okay, but I have to ask you the question. If you concede Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State, the first question is, who are the 4th and 5th teams? Because can Nebraska be a dark horse to get into that 5-6 slot? So who would you start with at 4?
Okay. Thinking about it for a week, I would say USC and Illinois are the teams I didn't give enough credit off the fly.
So USC and Illinois in some order are 4-5. Are they both in your head ahead of Michigan?
I think so.
Okay.
All right. Iowa.
Well,
or they're ahead of Iowa too. That's what I was asking.
Yeah. So
yeah, I think so.
We'll safely say those. Okay. So here we go. So I'm going to take USC out of it then.
Okay.
Okay. Above or below UCLA?
Oh, I think I'll say above.
Okay. Clearly below Illinois.
Not clearly, but I'll put them below in this particular exercise. Yeah.
So real quick, when you're answering these, BC, are you thinking of just this next year or general trajectory of the program?
Oh, I'm just thinking of this year.
Okay. I just want to make sure.
Okay. Indiana, above or below?
Above. I think maybe a 1-year wonder there. I don't know.
Above or below Rutgers?
I know you're big on Rutgers. I'd say above, though.
Okay. Above or below Minnesota?
Man, that's just barely above, but that's me showing some faith in the boys over there because that's been a bad deal. I have bad memories of trips up there.
It has been bad. It has been very bad. Okay, above or below Washington?
I'll say above, but I think Washington could be sneaky dangerous this year.
Okay, above or below Iowa?
It's like a push, basically, to me. I mean, it's like win the special teams battle just a little bit this time. I'll say just below until they prove otherwise. I'll go with that.
And I'll get to the next question. Generally speaking, it looks like you have Nebraska about 8th or 9th in the Big Ten right now. Is that?
I think right now that's where I'd start them, like 7 to 9. I think in that ranking, like if I did an 18-team ranking, and with obviously the opportunity, I think it's wide open to get to like 4. Like I really think that's like a put them in a blender type of deal, and the difference between 4 through 10 is not significant. So
Could I? How hard would I have to convince you that I think the difference this year is, or with this team? Because there's two teams. I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth, but I'm admitting that.
Mhm.
I think I think it takes an incredible leap of faith, and kind of myopic, that Nebraska's going to have success against Minnesota and Iowa in the same year, because they haven't since they've been in the Big Ten.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Fair.
And Minnesota's won 5 in a row.
Mhm.
So I'm admitting that. But what I will say is the difference this year, if you want optimism in Nebraska, it's number one, it starts with Dylan Raiola. And 1A, I get the sense we're undervaluing Nebraska's impact along the offensive line. I think this is the first time that I can remember in a handful of years where I'm not afraid, even in preseason without knowing anything, to say that the offensive line will be a strength. We're not used to saying that out loud. So I think it helps with not feeling very positive about the season. We're not used to really potential of good quarterback play and the potential of the O-line being a strength. Are we paralyzed by that, do you think?
Maybe a little bit paralyzed by the fact that even though O-line play hasn't reached great
We
in a while.
We have yet to call it a strength.
Yeah, but I think people are a little cynical because there's sometimes, for fair reason, like the guys involved in the offseason talk about it being a strength. Like I've done stories throughout the years where the O-linemen involved, like, yeah, we expect to be the heart of this team and all that stuff.
I don't hear the coaches say it a ton.
No. But players, because you want to believe in yourself and all that. But people see those stories like throughout the different years, and they're like, yeah, they're still sort of just okay. And so because of that, I do think that's one of those topics where people are like a little hesitant to like grab fully, like, okay, I'm going to put my heart on that. They're going to be really good. And honestly, too, maybe we have to get out of this thinking, but like I can't think of a lot of drives in recent years where it's felt like the O-line just put someone away when it was that moment. And I think it would be a defining moment if like early in this season, even if it was a game, they're up like 7 at Arrowhead and they go on like a 5.5, 6-minute drive, like late third quarter, early fourth. Not that they haven't had these drives mixed in, but something like that right off the jump in this fall would be huge, I think. And like, okay, I love how they put the smackdown on that team where you could see the other side wilt as you were getting into the fourth quarter. And I know that, when Rule first got here, that was sort of a big mission too, like to go for like 75 plus rushing yards in the fourth and all that. Maybe that shifted a little bit with philosophy, but I think that's still a big deal to kind of get around that this year.
So BC, if you're sitting here and
I'll ride with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that came up a little bit. You say about putting teams away.
Shafe mentioned that yesterday where he goes, hey, I just need to see when Nebraska's got the ball, and not exactly what you're talking about with putting teams away, but when they've got the ball and an opportunity to score a touchdown, to take the lead or to win a game, instead of it being that disaster moment that we all come to expect, of actually just getting the job done in a 4-minute situation or 5-minute situation where you're down 3 or 4, right?
Yeah, I mean, don't you suspect if you're going to take a huge jump, like if you're going to go from like a 7-win team to like, let's say like a 10-win team, it's going to take like a game or two where you actually have that drive that has failed for like 10 years. I mean, that like you could get to like 8 wins without that necessarily. But if you want to just like run through that sign and get right to 9, 10 and whatever, it's going to take, one of those seasons where you have a game where you're down 3 points with 6.5 minutes left and you do something with the football and then you get the stop, on defense. So, that I understand where, that's something though that they actually brought up a lot this spring. Like, Dylan Raiola and Rule mentioned like the 2-minute offense and situational football a whole lot. So I think that's been a big thing behind the scenes, I think, with Dylan and Dana and trying to work through that and what's best for us. And Dylan's also real about it in the fact that it's like you can prepare for it, but you can't know exactly what's going to be in front of you until it's this specific thing with this many timeouts. And this is this, like you still got to respond and hit the curveball when it comes.
So, BC, I'm glad you brought up Dylan there, because when having this conversation with Shafe yesterday, I was kind of forced to figure out why I had so much optimism compared to how Shafe was feeling about this. And part of it was
he was so good yesterday, BC. He talked optimistic people into being pessimistic.
I don't know if that's good or bad.
He
was convincing.
He was not. What he was saying was true.
It was. And so I landed on two things. Number one was I operate under the assumption that eventually Nebraska is going to figure it out. And I understand that's a dangerous place to start from because they haven't. But I've always operated under the assumption that it wasn't going to be like this forever. So when you start there and then you look at the roster, you feel differently, right? The second place was I was trying to think, okay, what is it about Dylan specifically that gives me that much confidence? And I go, okay, when's the last time Nebraska had a legitimate NFL quality quarterback? And I looked back, and this is imperfect because of different offenses and stuff that were run at Nebraska. But since 1974, there is exactly one quarterback that has been taken in the first 7 rounds of the NFL draft. And I think you know who that is, and nobody would point to him as a beacon of Nebraska quarterback play in Tanner Lee, right? Taken in the 6th round. Nobody since 1974 would have been drafted in the current format of the draft. They were all 8th round or later. So I look at it and I go, okay, that right there by itself, having an NFL quarterback or an NFL quality quarterback, and again, we don't know what Dylan Raiola's career is going to hold yet, but I think most people would agree his talent is there to have this conversation. Just having that is a enormous difference than everything else we've talked about for Nebraska over the last 25 years.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm telling you guys, for as good as I think Dylan is going to be, I still start O-line. And I feel like a fool in it.
No, but that's the thing.
I'm riding with this O-line.
So if you're right, if Dylan is that good, if Dylan is an NFL quality quarterback, the way I'm saying, and he's still not even the best thing, that's where the optimism is, right? Like if Dylan's an NFL quality quarterback and the offensive line's better than that.
I'm just telling you, if you find a left tackle or a right tackle, you're in business.
Yeah.
But play Pritchett, Spindler, Latovsky, and Evans, and you can run the football. And
you like Latovsky at guard.
If the season started tomorrow, my druthers would be to keep him inside. He is a man. I'd have to see him out at tackle more, but man, inside, I know listen, I hate Pro Football Focus. I can say that out loud. But I do use it as a benchmark, and I put it against my eyes in terms of what I see. He's on par, if not better.
It was the same as Spindler. He was the exact same guard grade as Spindler.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he really
we undervalue him because he's ours.
Yeah, because he wasn't new. But here's the other thing that we undervalue. Gunnar Gatula started at tackle last year.
Yeah.
Like that's a guy that we don't talk about.
He was clearly a year
and
away.
He was still good enough.
Yeah, they won games with a pup.
You know what I mean? So it's like I look at that and I go, I know that we talk about everybody else, but I sit here and I go, we have a guy with starting experience that's finally probably ready to play the spot.
I say that not to omit his talents. He didn't practice.
Yeah, no, right. I understand. Yeah.
You want to know one of the top 3 quotes that stood out to me this spring? It was just one line. It was Vincent Shavers. He didn't have to say it. He just said the line. They got some stuff. He brought up how he likes how together they are. He said how hard it is to get off run blocks against them, especially Pritchett, who he was talking specifically about. I don't know. That really stood out to me because I always look for like unsolicited. I mean, he was asked like something about the offense, but he could have went anywhere with it. And he really locked in on that O-line and how legit they were. And Shavers is just kind of one of those, here it is, like he's not, so that stuck with me. That was a big compliment, I thought, to the guys up front for a guy on the other side of the ball who's pretty good to say that.
And I'm not a skeptic, but I've just, right? It's experience. I've seen this a long time. And I'm telling you, BC, I had to talk myself off of the level of excitement that I felt about the O-line watching them at practice because I didn't feel right being like that. So I'm like, nah. Bad day for the D-line. Nah, bad day.
I'm telling you what, that
Shame.
D-line's good. That D-line's good.
And
Like the D-line, I'll die on that hill. The D-line's good.
so, but
Yeah.
the more I watched it, and the more I listened to people just you know me, I'm a big context clues guy. The more I listen to people unsolicitedly talk about it, I'm like, okay, it's weird. I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna trust me.
Mhm.
I
Trust your eyes.
99.9% of the time I always do anyway. I just don't know why I'm a little reluctant with the O line, but I've told myself it's because it's never really been a strength while Nebraska's been struggling, and I think it's going to be a strength if they stay healthy.
Yeah.
But
Well, it's
BC
loaded.
options.
I was gonna say, I don't even like knock on wood. I want them to stay healthy. I don't even think they have to stay that healthy.
They got options, man.
We've seen the last few years injuries have been a problem, and we didn't like their depth as much, and we still sit there and go, yeah, they were fine. Like if they stay healthy at all, they're going to be a lot better than that.
Yeah, they could go 7 or 8 deep. O-line and I would say man coverage on the defensive side were the two things that stuck out to me where it came out from coaches and players where it's like, that looks good. Like O-line came up like 6 or 7 practices in one of those Saturday press conferences after sort of a live go or a scrimmage, and Rule was talking about, he highlighted them, and they got highlighted again by Shavers and other guys throughout. And so it's backed up by what the guys have said. So it's definitely one of the things I think they felt good about leaving the spring. And you got Donovan Raiola credit. I mean, he's a guy like he has an interesting coaching story at the University of Nebraska when you think about a couple years ago, and he was the guy who was retained, and he's built that up, and they do have a brotherhood in that room. That's one thing that can't be doubted.
BC, I gave you some bad information. It was 76, not 74 on the quarterback. I apologize.
All right, I'll forgive you on that.
You let my man Kevin jump down your throat. Ferragamo, baby.
Yeah, it was Ferragamo, not Hum. I apologize. It's still been about half a century. So
You're still the man, BC, always.
All right, thanks for having me, guys.